Okay, folks, lecture number 11. We're moving right along here. Alrighty, fun lecture today. A lot of visuals for you good folks. Let's take a few seconds here and have a review of what we went over the last time we were together. As always, it's always quite a bit of material here. But we were closing out World War I. I mentioned to you about Liberty bonds, and we're going to sell $23 million worth of Liberty bonds to the public, trying to support this war. I mentioned to you also about the National War Labor Board here. 8-hour work day, rights of workers to bargain collectively, if you will, and also for women to receive equal pay as that of a man if they're doing the same job as a man. And as a result of that, we're going to see union labor to actually skyrocket. It's going to go up to about 5 million. Before you know it here, folks, we're going to bring it down. We're going to bring it down to size here. And we also mentioned 1913, 1914 Ludlow massacre that took place out in the coal fields there, out in Colorado. I likewise mentioned Great Migration, where as many as 400,000, probably 500,000 African Americans came from the Deep South and went to the North, and this would be followed by another 400,000 to 500,000 white people that left the South and went to the North. Often this would cause a lot of problems, as you well know, with racial riots, that sort of thing. All right, we also mentioned about the Committee on Public Information, who was directed by George Creel to drum up support for the war. All right, we're running out of time here, folks, so very quickly we went through the Espionage Act, the Sabotage Act, the Sedition Act. You should be familiar with all of those. We also talked about Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, and you should know what the 14th point is of that, which is to form an international peacekeeping organization, which is known as the League of Nations. All right, we also talked about the Paris Peace Conference, Paris Peace Accord, which took place in January of 1919, lasted for 4 months at the Palace at Versailles, and the Big Four were present. You should be familiar with those individuals that make up the Big Four. And towards the end of the class period, we talked about the A. Mitchell Palmer, the Red Raids, or the Palmer Raids, as they're sometimes referred to as, and we closed out that section with a little discussion there about Sacco and Vanzetti. And in 1927, Sacco and Vanzetti went to the electric chair. That's an unfortunate thing here, folks. Oh, I didn't mention this to you the other day. It was in 1977, I believe it was, that the state of Massachusetts exonerated Sacco and Vanzetti and admitted that they had executed 2 innocent individuals. All right, so let's run into today's lecture here, folks. Fun lecture, if you will, as I told you a few minutes ago. We're going to deal with the 1920s, wonderful period of time, the Roaring 20s, as some people refer to it as. I wish I was there in the 1920s. If I was there then, I probably would not be here today anyway. But my mother and father were both products of the 1920s, and they talked about the Roaring 20s quite frequently. So a wonderful period of time. On the other hand, they had to go through the 1930s, which was not such a wonderful period. So let's go back to our documents camera here, folks, and we'll pick up our discussion here with the 1920s. The president was Warren G. Harding. In a little bit, I'll show you a likeness here of Warren G. Harding, tell you a little bit more about him. Not a real smart president by any means here, folks, but I don't want to give you all that information right now. He looked like a president. That was it. And he called for a return to normalcy. I just wrote this in a few minutes ago. Actually, my English counterparts tell me that that is not proper English. It should not be a return to normalcy. It should be a return to normality. All right, but it's a time that's characterized as a period of wealth and conservatism and wildness, and that's pretty much the way it was here, folks. The country will enter a mild depression, or I should say recession, after World War I was over, but we're going to bounce back in the 1920s here, folks, and it's going to be one of the most prosperous periods of time until 2016, and 2016 until 2020, until we had the onset of the pandemic. But anyway, that was a prosperous period of time from 2016 to 2020, and then we likewise have a most wonderful period of time here in the 1920s. Manufacturing output went up 60%. Per capita income went up 30%. A wonderful period of time here. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, it's down the page a little bit here, folks, that even though we say that the 1920s was a prosperous period of time, we still had 40 to 50% of the American population that were just at the bare existence level. So not everybody prospered here in the 1920s. Okay, so let's explore on why this was, and it was primarily because we had 2 major industries at that time. These two industries were automobiles, and we also had construction. Let me go ahead and address this issue here with construction. It was a construction boom in the 1920s here, folks. Some of you have been down the coast of Florida, on the Miami side anyway. Well, much of that was developed in the 1920s here, folks, so it was just a tremendous construction industry boom of that period. And the other thing we had here were automobiles. So I want you to take a look at some figures here. In 1914, if you wanted to purchase a Model T Ford, Henry Ford had developed this, but it would cost you $950. It required 12 and a half hours to complete that car from start to finish on an assembly line. By 1929, we don't see this very often, by 1929, the price of a Model A Ford was $290, and it took 1.5 hours start to finish to complete that automobile. That is amazing here. All right, and we were producing 9,000, or Ford was producing 9,000 cars a day. A car was rolling off the Ford assembly line it was actually every 8.5 seconds, and I put it up here, every 10 seconds. We had 30 million cars on the roads here in the United States of America. Do you folks understand what supply misses demand, or supply exceeds demand? And that's what's going to take place here, folks, but not right now. Not now. It's the 1920s, and things are going very, very well. Likewise, we'll see in 1926 that General Motors, GM, came out with the annual change. They also came out with color choices. Ooh, this makes buying a car quite painful here, folks, when you just got the black Model T with no options on it. Very simple. You just bought your car and that was it. But they also came out, General Motors came out with Buicks and Chevrolets and Oldsmobile and Pontiac and Cadillac. And I'm sure you probably at least have heard of some of those anyway. Okay, here's where I made my little comment here that we had for 50-60% of the population just a bare minimal existence levels here. Now for union labor didn't do very well at this time. We had this boom during World War I with the National War Labor Board, but now things began to change here, folks. And for many of these employers, they were using what was called the American plan, or better yet, why don't we describe it as welfare capitalism? And I'll give you a chance to rest your eyes here, folks. We'll go back to me for a second. And here's what I'm going to do. If I'm your boss here, folks, I will give you a paid vacation. I will shorten the number of hours you work each week, and I will not reduce your wages here. In fact, you'll get a pay increase out of this. The only stipulation on this, you don't join a union. You don't join a union. And in some cases, these workers would be forced to sign a yellow dog contract in which you would actually sign on a dotted line. If you wanted to be employed, you would not join a union. And as a result of this, we're going to see union labor from 1920 to 1929 decline from 5 million individuals to 3 million workers here. Don't worry. If you're in support of union labor, by the time we get into the 1930s and a different president here, we are going to increase dramatically. We're going to almost triple the number of union memberships. All right, so back to we go to the camera, and let's see here. And let's see what else is going to take place. That was welfare capitalism. Unionism is subversive. Union membership, as I said a second ago, will drop dramatically. All right, now aviation is going to increase too. And this is really, really interesting here, folks. We had from the Wright brothers, as you well know, the aircraft is going to improve significantly, particularly when we get into World War I. And then after World War I, we're going to see a number of former aviators or people associated with aviation. And these individuals will put on these stunts, these shows. They called them barnstormers, where you actually go out and walk on the wings of an aircraft, on the top wing of an aircraft here. They're referred to as wing walkers, daredevils, barnstormers, just going from city to city here in these old vintage World War I aircraft, just putting on these aerobatic shows. If you were in class now, some of you will be in class, in all probability, I'll show you a video which shows you some of these wing walkers here. My dad, who was in the 1920s, actually bore witness to this, to some of these. And said the people in his community in Ohio would go out to the local airfield and just watch these wing walkers perform. Another individual, Charles Lindbergh, and I want you to recognize Charles Lindbergh. This is 1927, by the way, May of 1927. And in fact, I'll show you a likeness here of Charles Lindbergh. People called him Lucky Lindy, tall, thin, later rise to the rank of colonel in the Army Air Force, if you will, Army Air Corps. And a plane that is standing under the single wing to this plane is known as the Spirit of St. Louis. If you go to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum today, this is what the aircraft looks like. I took this photograph a number of years ago when I was in the Air and Space Museum a couple of years ago. The Spirit of St. Louis is now on the floor, and here it is suspended from the ceiling. But it was no more than a flying gas tank. If you look at the front window, there is no front window, so you literally had to fly looking out the side windows. And there had been a prize offered to the first individual that would sail, I should say, that would fly nonstop solo, from across the Atlantic Ocean, from Europe to the United States, the United States to Europe. It had never been done before. And so in May of 1927, Charles Lindbergh, with 3 ham sandwiches, that's all he had to eat here, folks, flew out of New York and actually crossed the ocean there. It took him 33 and a half hours, plus the 3 ham sandwiches, by the way, and he finally landed in La Bourget Airport, which is one of the airports that's found in Paris. You can go there today if you wish to do so. That is not Charles de Gaulle Airport. It's not the major airport. So Lucky Lindy was actually able to fly across the Atlantic Ocean here. And we will find many, many other aviators that will follow suit after that, to include a lady by the name of Amelia Earhart, which that will not be until the 1930s, however. So I want you to recognize Charles Lindbergh, by the way. All right, now let's talk about various aspects of the American society in the 1920s, and we'll address the topic here of women. Many women worked as pink-collar workers. If you don't understand what I'm talking about with that, pink-collar workers, these are secretaries, they're telephone operators, sales clerks, generally working for less wages than that of a man. All right, another aspect we have in American society are African Americans, and for blacks, particularly in the large cities, it was difficult to find a job. In fact, the jobs that you would take would be the jobs that white people wouldn't work. And I'm talking about unskilled workers here, janitors, dishwashers, garbage collectors, maids, if you will, elevator operators, if I didn't mention that, cooks, laundry attendants, and we could just go on and on with that. There were very few opportunities for union membership for African American laborers, with one exception here, folks. I want you to remember this, and we'll talk about it in another lecture likewise here. In 1925, a black man by the name of A. Philip Randolph. Later in the course, I'll show you a likeness here, a photograph of A. Philip Randolph at a more appropriate time. But A. Philip Randolph developed this labor union, which was called the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. I hope you'll commit that to memory there, folks. All righty, which sleeping car porters, these were like custodians that were on a Pullman sleeping car. Okay, so let's move right along with some of the other aspects in the American society. Other individuals. We had a large number of Japanese that were present over on the West Coast. Particularly that of California. Now, we can divide these Japanese into 2 different groups. And by the way, by and large, these 2 groups will make up the menial labor source, the unskilled labor source over in the California area. Now, I want you to remember these 2 terms. We'll come back to them at a later time. Not today, but later when we get towards World War II. One of the terms is issy. Now, issy are Japanese that have immigrated to our country. They probably are not citizens, probably. If they've been here long enough, they may have attained U.S. citizenship. And then we have the other group here, and I don't know if you can read my writing here. These are the Nissi. And the Nissi are American-born. These are people of Japanese heritage that are born in the United States of America. Maybe they've been here for 2 or 3 generations. Their families have been here for 2 or 3 generations. And those individuals are U.S. citizens just like you and I here, folks. The Issy probably aren't American citizens, but Nissi, they are American citizens. So when we come back to this at a later time, when we enter into World War II and a war with Japan, we're going to find that many of the Nissi, particularly, and Issy, are going to be face many prejudicial attitudes placed towards those individuals. Also, we had a number of Filipinos, which were manual labor workers in California, and often these Filipinos were not welcomed, and they would be harassed, if you will. Moving on here, folks, in the Southwest, most of the menial laborers were that of Mexican descent, and I intentionally did not use the word Hispanic. I used the word Mexican. They were Mexicans there, and seasonal workers largely here, folks, mostly pickers, picking produce. Another group that we had were farmers. Farmers have always had a hard time in life, it seems like here, folks. And after World War I, the number of tractors in the United States, it quadrupled. We had a 400% increase in the number of tractors. And so what this means, and we'll roughly, loosely translate this, is that farmers can now produce 4 times as much as what they did before, if we have 4 times the number of tractors with that. So it sounds good on the surface here, folks, but if we're producing 4 times the amount of food crops that we had before, what does that do to the price of foods? It drives down farmers' profits here. And we're going to have to deal with this when we get into the Great Depression in the 1930s here, folks. So, and also, we will find that for middle-class individuals, particularly with the middle class, there's more money available, so they buy items for pleasure instead of convenience. And we'll move right along with this, and we'll find such things here that I write this down for you. We'll see such things in the average household here, like refrigerators, washing machines, vacuum cleaners, which will all ease the burden, serve to ease the burden, of domestic chores here. And I'm trying to darken this for you good folks. I'm not having much luck with that. Okay, we're going to see some transitions to take place. If we were in class face-to-face here, I would identify some of you good folks here that had on wristwatches, and I try not to wear a watch because I'm not interested in time, to tell you the truth, except the start time and the end time of the class period. But wristwatches would replace these old pocket watches. And if you're in my class face-to-face, I will show you my grandfather's pocket watch here. But that was a big change here. And also belts. Up until this time, gentlemen wore suspenders. You always wore suspenders. You never wore a belt. And I hate to tell you, folks, if you wear a belt, belts interfere with your digestion. So you need to just remove that belt and don a pair of suspenders, and you'll be a much happier person here. Okay, and I'm saying that facetiously. Advertising became a way of life here, folks. And if we had more time, I'll show you a number of advertisements. I'm just going to show you one in just a second here, folks. But before I get into that, more and more individuals would smoke and openly smoke, and women would openly smoke. And that's just something that just does not happen in society, and before the 1920s anyway. So we'll take care of 2 things here. I'm going to show you an advertisement and show you a smoking commercial here. And here we go right here, folks. And we'll look at this one. Sunshine mellows, heat purifies. These are Lucky Strike cigarettes. No sissy filters on them whatsoever here, folks. By the way, it's toasted. So notice we have the young lady out there on the beach there, toasting herself, so to speak, and smoking these toasted, unfiltered cigarettes. And it's always kind to your throat. You want to bet? I'm telling you, folks, if any people are still foolish enough to smoke cigarettes and use tobacco products here, that is a no-brainer here, folks. It will take your life. And I'm talking about oral cancer, and I'm talking about lung cancer, laryngeal cancer here. You won't win that battle. So if you feel like you're a real man, you just step up to the plate and you just openly smoke here. I'm sorry, folks. I know I offended some of you good folks. And anyway, I am very much of an anti-tobacco person. My mother passed away from lung cancer. All right, on we go here, folks. Magazines of that time that appeared. We had Time Magazine, we had Reader's Digest magazine, Saturday Evening Post magazine. Let me show you what Saturday Evening Post looked like. Very popular type magazine. For those of you who had nothing better to do with your hard-earned money, you can buy old newspapers such as this. This is dated here on the 20th of December in 1913. This is Saturday Evening Post. All right, so back we go here, folks. And let's move right along here, folks. Okay, so other things that are associated with this period. We're going to see movies to come out. Now, Thomas Edison had developed the kinetoscope, or the peep show, sometimes it's referred to as, and people began to go to these Nickelodeons. The price of that was a nickel. Later, they're referred to as a movie palace, and these were all silent movies at that time, and you could actually go and see the very first one there, which was first movie. It was produced 1983, I believe it was anyway. Let me see if I can find a date on that because that just slipped out of my mind here. And that one was called The Great Train Robbery. It was 1903. It lasted 8 minutes, precisely 8 minutes. That's my kind of movie, to tell you the truth, folks. I mean, what a date was that? You got an 8-minute movie. It cost you a nickel to take your date in, and you know what a inexpensive weekend. All right, so that was A Great Train Robbery. A few years after this, about 1915, they came out with The Birth of a Nation. That was 2 hours and 45 minutes here, folks. Oh my gosh, I'd hate to sit through that. It was a silent movie. Glorified the Ku Klux Klan, by the way. You can probably find it on YouTube if you're interested in that. Anyway, and it did glorify the Ku Klux Klan. Past couple of years, they came out with another movie, which is called Birth of a Nation. It has nothing to do with the original one. But here we had silent movie stars such as Charlie Chaplin, which is up here. Rudolph Valentino happened to be another one of those. Buster Keaton was another one here. And we could go on and on with other individuals. By 1927, the talkies emerged, and in particular the first one, which was called The Jazz Singer. Came out in 1927. The Jazz Singer starred Al Jolson. I'm looking around the room here to see if I have a likeness here of Al Jolson, and I don't see that. I do have one, if I can locate it here, folks, and I seem to have lost this anyway. And if I can find it in just a second here, I'll come back to it. Here it is right here next to the Lucky Strike commercial here. This is Al Jolson, who was a white man, by the way. He was Russian. And he came to the United States. He was a natural singer, a natural dancer, he and his brother. But Al Jolson became involved in in Hollywood, so to speak. Very often he would perform in blackface. This was called blackface musicals, what it was known as. And you can see an advertisement over here. Performing such songs as Swanee and Mammy. You can look on YouTube if you're curious enough about that, and you can actually visualize those. Okay, so that's about it with Al Jolson. And by the way, my dad always told me, he said, when they went to the talkies, the male performers, actors changed, because you had these nice looking, guys, in the silent movies that had a real nice looking guys, good physiques, but when they went to the talkies, their voices just didn't match up. The voices just weren't very masculine. So according to my dad, they ended up changing, many of the male cast members as a result of that. Okay, in 1922, the first commercial radio station came out, and it was broadcasting live, and out of Pittsburgh, by the way. It was called KDKA. Within 2 years, we'll find that there are 200 more public commercial radio stations that will emerge. And for many of the women from this time, they're going to drop their old Victorian sexuality, their Victorian female images here, and they will openly smoke and drink and dance and go to the dance halls. They wear these seductive clothing, short skirts, makeup, if you can imagine that, attend these wild parties, go to these speakeasies. Hey, don't forget here, folks, we're in Prohibition at this time. So all of these women, they are breaking the law. Wear their hair short. This haircut is called a bob. I'm looking around trying to find one here. And hang on just a jiffy here, and let me try to find this. This is a female here of that period of time, getting her hair cut short in the traditional bob here. You can also see an adjacent photo there. That is Louis Armstrong, by the way, which we'll talk a little bit about probably in just a few minutes. These young ladies, by the way, which had they were kind of disdainful for the speech of their parents here, and it was like a kind of unusual speech, but they referred to themselves as the flappers. Here's a photograph of one. It's in your textbook here. Isn't she cute? All right, I had a student a couple semesters ago that looked just like this, dressed just like this also. Her classmates referred to her skanky. I don't know what that meant. But anyway, so those were the flappers. Let's see if I wrote this out for you, and I did. And this, by the way, here it is. And by the way, this, of course, is called the Jazz Age. Some people refer to it as Flaming Youth. This was just so different than that of their Victorian mothers or Victorian parents that we had. Big change will take place. Okay, during this time, more people attended high school. We had a number of high school students doubled. The number of college students tripled during this period of time. And popular activities for individuals. I'm not familiar with this game. I've seen it played, but I don't know how to play this. But it's called Mahjong. It was very popular during that period of time. Crossword puzzles were quite popular here. And I'm telling you, folks, if you look me right in the eyes here, you're looking at a crossword puzzle holic. And my day just cannot end unless I've worked the daily crosswords, the jumble, and the daily Sudoku here. So I am absolutely obsessed with those. All right, but I don't know if you work those, and that's your business here, folks, but it was very popular during those times here. People played miniature golf. I think we call it putt-putt golf today, or goofy golf, or something like that anyway. I don't do that sort of thing. The Book of the Month Club was quite popular during that time, but on the other hand, we're going to have a number of Americans that are going to take a completely different attitude. And this group, we'll give them a name here, we're going to call them the Disenchanted, or the Lost Generation. Many people at this time felt like World War I was a hoax. I probably mentioned that to you at an earlier time. World War I just never did have to take place for America to get involved with it. It was munitions manufacturers, business dealings here that maneuvered our country into a war. So we're going to see a group of people. These were largely educated individuals, they're artists, writers here, that will just become disillusioned with America. In the words here of Gertrude Stein, while she was talking to Ernest Hemingway in the streets of Paris, this is the Lost Generation. All right, so let's move on with that. And part of this Lost Generation dealt with a group of individuals that were just critics of modern society. These were the debunkers. These are the debunkers. And one of the best ones that is known for this is this person right here, H.L. Mencken. Let me get it out of the way so you can see how to write his name. H.L. Mencken there. I think he looks like Shemp on the Three Stooges. Don't you think he looks like Shemp? Anyway, all right, I always like the Three Stooges. Maybe you do too. But he was the editor of a magazine which was called Smart Set, an editor of a magazine which is called American Mercury. Folks, this is highbrow material here. And I'm talking about this is reading here that's designed for the intellectual reader. This is not penny press type material here, but it's for the intellectual, it's for the highbrow, if you understand what I'm talking about. You can see the name there of the editor, H.L. Mencken. If you so choose to do, you can go to Baltimore, and I don't recommend that you go into this area of Baltimore, but you can actually go by and see where the home of H.L. Mencken is located. H.L. Mencken referred to the average American as a member of the bourgeoisie. Now, that's a play on the word bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie is middle class, but what H.L. Mencken is saying is the average American is stupid. The average American is a boob. He's a member of the bourgeoisie. I'll share a couple of quotations with you from H.L. Mencken. I like this guy. He's highbrow now. But Puritanism. And let that word sink in here, folks. Puritanism. What is it? Puritanism is the haunting fear that somewhere, some person is going to have a good time in life. Have you met people that had that? Life is supposed to be fun here, folks. Life is too short. I'm telling you, good folks, you need to have a good time. Don't do stupid things. Don't go out and use tobacco products or alcohol excessively or drugs. But life is too short. But I'm sure you've seen people just as I that take offense. If you're going to hold hands or go to a theater or dance or kiss or whatever the case is. Yeah. So that's what H.L. Mencken described Puritanism as, that undaunting fear that somewhere somebody is going to have a good time. He also described Sunday school. Sunday school. That is a place where little children serve penance, serve time for the guilty conscience of their parents. You have to think about that. All right, back we go here. That's H.L. Mencken. So I want to mention to you about some of the writers of this period of time. And we have some wonderful, wonderful writers that emerged from this period. And let's see, the first one I mentioned here is that of Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway, people call him Papa, by the way. And I'm going to show you a likeness of him as a young man. You probably are more closely identified with Ernest Hemingway as an elderly man anyway. Wrote a number of books here. I'm looking around here trying to find some of the books that he wrote. One of my favorites here, and I love Hemingway. I've read all of his writings here. The Old Man and the Sea. It's not very long, so it's an easy read here. Here's one here, which is a Farewell to Arms. It's about Ernest Hemingway in World War I. He was an ambulance driver, by the way. Later in your textbook, you'll find a photograph of him here. Let's see what else I need to mention to you about Ernest Hemingway here. Sun Also Rises. Here's Nose of Kilimanjaro. To Have and Have Not. That was an interesting book. For Whom the Bell Tolls. I did not mention that to you a few minutes ago. Hemingway had had a home, and his home, which was present in Key West, Florida, is still present there today. He had another home, which is in Havana, Cuba. And if you get a chance to go to Cuba, be sure to go by and see La Vigia, I believe is what the name of it is. Interesting place to visit. And here's Hemingway's home, which is in Key West. There is a charge to go inside that home and go inside the compound there. Been there several times. I always enjoy it very much. Notice here it has a cat over here. And if you go inside Hemingway's place there, you'll find, more cats than you can actually count. And these cats date back to the time of Hemingway. It's just litter after litter after litter, all the way back to the 1920s. So many of the cats here have names from Shakespeare. Many of the cats have deformities. Like I saw one there that had 12 toes. Honest to goodness there. It's just genetic anomalies with that. Here's a likeness here of Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway had problems here, folks. He had things that talked to him in his mind. He had alcohol-related problems with that. All thinking men are atheists. I'll share a quotation with you there from Ernest Hemingway. Very often he would go down to Sloppy Joe's bar. Those of you that have been down on Duval Street in Key West, you know where Sloppy Joe's is, but that's not the original Sloppy Joe. The original Sloppy Joe's a couple of blocks away. That was the original one. It's kind of a dive, it honestly is. But today, if you go there, it's called Captain Tony's. But it is kind of fun to go inside there, sit down, get yourself an ice cold glass of ice water, and just think about Ernest Hemingway for a while. Kind of interesting here. Okay, we had other writers of this period here. Sinclair Lewis, interesting writer. And I've read some of his works. I'm not real fascinated with all of his works here, folks. But anyway, Main Street happened to be one of those that he wrote. Bobbitt happened to be another. Another writer that we have, one of my favorites, and I'm telling you folks right now, I could spend the rest of my life retired and just reading F. Scott Fitzgerald, Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. And what did he write? We all know what he wrote. One of his most famous pieces here, which is Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. About Jay Gatsby, a man that was wealthy, World War I veteran, that gained fame and fortune, trying to win the love of the woman that he cared for. F. Scott Fitzgerald. Here's a likeness here of F. Scott Fitzgerald, also his wife Zelda. She's from Alabama, by the way. And I'm just going to tell you, she's crazy. She is crazy. If you get a chance to go to Montgomery, folks, be sure and stop at the home of F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda. It's a museum today. It's a fun place to visit, by the way. Here's another likeness here of F. Scott Fitzgerald. All right. This side of Paradise, Babylon Revisited here. This side of Paradise, Babylon Revisited. Many, many others here. And quite a number of short stories from that. Strange Case, Benjamin Button happened to be another one here. Bernice Bobs Her Hair happens to be an interesting one. Let's see if I wrote down some others, and I did, a number of these individuals here. And we have Thomas Wolfe, Gertrude Stein, Edna Ferber, Willett Cather, Eugene O'Neill, and also a number of African-American writers of this period. I'm looking around for something here, trying to find this. And this group of writers fell into the category that's often referred to as Harlem Renaissance. We had Langston Hughes. Here's a likeness here of Langston Hughes. Harlem Renaissance, down at the bottom there, down below Charlie Chaplin. And Langston Hughes. And Count D. Cullen, who was a poet. James Weldon Johnson. You can't read that. James Weldon Johnson. All right, then I'm going to throw this in for free here, folks. And this is not in your textbook, but some of my favorites. And I loved the writings of these individuals here. They're Southern writers. And I think Southern writers do not get credit for their genius in their writing. Many, many of our best writers in this country came from the South. They referred to themselves as the fugitives. Many of them were Vanderbilt graduates. Robert Penn Warren, All the King's Men, one of my favorite books. I did not bring a copy out. I'm sorry for that. W.J. Cash happened to be another one. Alan Tate, C. Van Woodard, John Crow Ransom, and my all-time favorite writer here, folks, William Faulkner. Bill Faulkner. Some of you probably are familiar with him. Here's one of my favorite books. Not many people read this book. It's called The Unvanquished by William Faulkner. I can't even pronounce it there. Matapa County here. If you get a chance to go to Oxford, Mississippi, be sure and take in the house site, the home site of William Faulkner. That's what I was trying to butcher the name here. Yoknepatalpa County. And anyway, and not very far from William Faulkner's Roanoke home, and you can tour those grounds free of charge. For you to go inside the house, you'll have to pay a fee here, folks, but not very far from there, you'll find the burial site of William Faulkner. Just take a few coins, throw it out on the tombstone there. That's what people do. People often leave whiskey bottles or beer cans or that sort of thing there. As most of these writers of that period of time, William Faulkner did have an alcohol abuse problem. Okay, so let's move right along here, folks. Prohibition will likewise take place during this period of time. The 18th Amendment, the Noble Experiment. One individual associated with this in Chicago, the principal gang leader, was Scarface Al Capone. Some people refer to him as Snorky. Prostitution, gambling, kidnapping, bootlegging, if you will. He was like the governor of the state almost. He had that much power here, my friends. It's an interesting person to read about. You read further about it where Capone's gang ambushed that of Bugs Moran, George Bugs Moran. Some of you probably are familiar with the 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Capone's henchmen were dressed as police and ambushed that of Bugs Moran's individuals here. All right, well, likewise, we'll see the reappearance of the Ku Klux Klan. Ku Klux Klan will emerge once again in 1915, led by William J. Simmons. Oddly enough, many people associate the Ku Klux Klan with the South, but the Klan membership in the South had declined at this time, and it was the Klan membership in the North, particularly that of Indiana. Here you can see in this likeness right here. This is in 1926. It's about 40,000 Klansmen that are marching down the streets here of our nation's capital, Pennsylvania Avenue here. Fortunately, the Klan will disappear after this period of time, and we will not see them to come back until the 1950s, 1960s, and thank goodness we don't hear much about the Klan today. They're largely just unheard of. Okay, now during this time, we can associate religious thought with either of two types. We had the type, and I'll take this one first. This is the fundamentalist type. These were individuals, and I hate to stereotype, but these were individuals that lived mostly in the countryside. They were individuals that did not have much education, and they had a tendency to interpret the Bible exactly as it is written. And then we had the other group, and this group were the modernists. They're not atheists, they're not agnostics, but they would adapt science and religion. They would blend the two here. Well, if I ask you here, and these were individuals that were more educated by and large anyway, and generally people that lived in the cities here. And I'm sure you're familiar with this. You know what I'm talking about with that. We've seen it before. But I want to take you to a place here in Tennessee. And if you want to go to this place in Tennessee, go to Chattanooga. And when you're in Chattanooga, drive by the baseball stadium, stay on that road, I don't remember which road it is, and go about 25 miles, and this will take you up to Dayton, Tennessee. It's in Ray County. It's like going back in time here, folks. And it was a town that was largely fundamentalist. And in that town, there was a school. And the school, which was a Ray County High School, whatever it is. And in Tennessee at that time, it was illegal to teach evolution in the classroom. Charles Darwin's Evolution in the classroom. You could only, and it was a Butler Act. The Butler Act prohibited you from teaching anything about creationism other than what was directly given out of the Holy Bible itself. Well, and by the way, at this time, in Kentucky, a teacher had been jailed for teaching that the world was round. So that's kind of the atmosphere that we have here. So the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, had put out an announcement in Tennessee that if anybody was willing to teach evolution in the classroom, that if that individual was fired, then the ACLU would provide them with free legal counsel to try to win the case against them. So let's go back to the camera here, folks. And sure enough, we're going to find a young man. He was 25 years of age, and this young man's name is John T. Scopes, and he was a coach. He was a football coach at that high school. And there he is right here. He's with his daddy. And there he is. Oops, I got the wrong one. Here he is right here, and he's with his father on the front steps there. And he took the bait. from the ACLU, and he said, well, I think I will teach evolution in the classroom, and even though he is a coach. And so what happened one day, he was in a biology classroom. And Scopes knows nothing about evolution whatsoever, but he was serving as a substitute teacher. But he delved into the subject here of evolution, and sure enough, he was arrested. And he was arrested by the authorities for teaching evolution in the classroom. So now this is going to generate a big trial. It's going to take place at the Ray County Courthouse. This is what the courthouse looks like today here. That is what it looks like. That's what it looked like back in those times too. Today, if you wish to do so, you can visit the museum there, which is called the Scopes Trial Museum. I'm telling you, good folk, it is a fun place to visit. So, and representing John T. Scopes was the American Civil Liberties Union attorney here, and this person's name is Clarence Darrow. I'll write his name out for you in just a few seconds here. Clarence Darrow. Here's a statue outside of the courthouse today that is of Clarence Darrow. He's a very cunning attorney here, folks. He was a socialist, by the way. And in representing that of the state of Tennessee in the prosecution was our old friend William Jennings Bryan. William Jennings Bryan, he ran for president of the United States on 2 occasions. And outside the courthouse today, you will find here a statue of William Jennings Bryan. There he is. All right, so anyway, and this is what's going to make this little town here. And I will tell you here, this is a fundamentalist town. The trial will take place in the courthouse. They hear the 2 attorneys right here, Clarence Darrow, William Jennings Bryan. And that courtroom that the hearing took place is still there today. And by the way, and I'll just keep that on there, but you can actually go into that courtroom if you wish to do so. The judge that presided over this hearing here was a Methodist minister. 11 members of the jury were members of his congregation. So it's not a level playing field by any means. Plastered all over the courthouse, outside, on telephone poles, were all these posters of "Come to Jesus, come to Jesus, read the Bible, read the Bible." And one individual actually brought in a chimpanzee and brought a chimpanzee into the town there and dressed him up like a little man here in a suit here, and was parading him around town on a leash, saying, "This is probably your grandfather. I don't know, probably your great-grandfather," whatever. And hence we get the name for Dayton today. They call it Monkey Town. All right, so the trial took place. And amazingly, Clarence Darrow called to the witness stand the prosecution attorney, William Jennings Bryan. William Jennings Bryan, who was supposed to be an expert on the Bible. And so listen to the dialogue here. And here's Clarence Darrow talking to William Jennings Bryan. William Jennings Bryan's on the witness stand. "You've given careful consideration to the Bible, haven't you, Mr. Bryan?" And Bryan replied, "Yes, sir, I've tried to, but of course I've studied it more as I've become older than when I was a boy." And Darrow stated, "Do you claim then that everything in the Bible should be literally interpreted?" And Bryan said, "I believe everything in the Bible should be accepted exactly as it is given there." And then Darrow slyly asked, "The Bible says that every living creature not on Noah's Ark was drowned. Does that mean that the fishes drowned?" And Bryan had difficulty in answering that. Then Darrow continued to question Bryan about the actuality of Jonah and the whale, Joshua making the sun stand still, and the Tower of Babel. And Bryan had more and more difficulty in answering. And then Darrow said, "Do you think the earth was made in 6 days?" And William Jennings Bryan said, "Well, not 6 days of 24 hours. My impression is they were periods." And then Darrow, "Now, if you call those periods, that might have been for a very long time." And Bryan answered, "That might have been." And Darrow said, "Then creation might have been going on for a very long time." And Bryan stepped right into it. It might have continued for millions of years. Well, do you think that is going to sway the jury? The trial lasted 8 days here, folks. The jury deliberated for 9 minutes. And Scopes was found to be guilty of teaching evolution. Wow. It went to appeal, if you will, and when it went to appeal, the trial was thrown out on a technicality. All right, so anyway, unfortunately for William Jennings Bryan, within the next few days here, folks, William Jennings Bryan laid down, took a nap, and he never woke up. We think he died of diabetes. William Jennings Bryan was a massive man who in one breakfast could eat a huge melon, 6 eggs with ham, pancakes drowned in butter, 3 plates of hash browns, and a brace of quail. All right, and I encourage you very much here, folks, that if you are up in that area of Chattanooga, take the short trip and go up to Monkey Town. I'm telling you, good folks, it hasn't changed hardly at all. Okay, some other things that are going to take place here, my friend, in the 1920s. We're going to bring this chapter to a close here, folks. Our old friend Eugene V. Debs will pass away in 1926 of congestive heart failure. And today, if you're traveling up to Terre Haute, Indiana, be sure and take the time to go by the grave site there, Eugene V. Debs. All right, he died in 1926. He's not buried in the family plot. He was an embarrassment to the family, and they felt like if he was buried in the family plot, then the family plot would be vandalized. So he's buried about 100 yards away from where the remainder of the family is. To refresh your memory, here's Eugene V. Debs right here. And if you go to the college that is present here, folks, and there is his home. I showed you photographs of his home. Free of charge, by the way. They would appreciate a little contribution if you go inside. Okay, let's see what else is going to take place here. And in 1927, this individual, the Sultan of Swat, George Herman Ruth, Babe Ruth, hit 60 home runs. 60 home runs in the shortest season than we have today here. Well, not in this season anyway. Not on steroids, by the way. Not on steroids. And so that is Babe Ruth. We look at my photograph here. At the top photograph, we can see Babe Ruth. Let's see if I can find him here. I've got it marked so it's easier for you folks to right here is Babe Ruth. That's a 1927 World Championship, New York Yankees. And you can also see Lou Gehrig that's present there in that photograph. All right, let's take a look at the bottom photograph here. And this is the Pittsburgh crawfish. Pittsburgh crawfish. Let me make sure I had that right here. Pittsburgh Crawfords. All right, and that's a photograph. If you see anything unusual about that photograph, all of those players are African American. If you see anything about the unusual in the top photograph, all of those players there are white Americans here. And at that time, we had the Negro Leagues. And if you look at the individual that is present here, down in this area right here, that is Josh Gibson. And occasionally I have some of my students that are familiar with Josh Gibson. Most students have never heard of him. But he hit 70 home runs, not on steroids, by the way, and I think that was in 1934. So anyway, and let's see what else is going to take place here. In 1927, Gene Tooney had a boxing match with the world champion Jack Dempsey in what was called the long count, and Gene Tooney actually won that boxing match, defying all predictions with that. All right, in 1928, Walt Disney developed a cartoon character. This cartoon character, who is known as Steamboat Willie. Steamboat Willie. All right, we know him today as Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse. And following year, in 1929, Elsie Seeger developed this was in Chester, Illinois, by the way, developed another cartoon figure, and this individual, and by the way, all of these individuals in Popeye, by the way, in chat were based upon characters from Chester, Illinois. You did have a person that was like Brutus, a person like Popeye, a person like Wimpy, Olive Oil. It's an interesting place to visit. The whole town revolves around that. Welcome to Chester, home of Popeye. Yeah, here's another brochure about Chester, Illinois. It is the home of Popeye. Yeah, novelty stores everywhere there about Popeye. I even had a chance, I personally had a chance to go into this novelty store and carry on a conversation with that lady there. That's out of some magazine anyway. So that's remarkable with that. Okay, so let's go back to a couple of other things here, folks. And I want to shift it over to myself here in the 1920 presidential election. Warren G. Harding was elected president. Here he is right here. He looks like a president. He looks like a president. As I've said before, not a terribly smart president, considered by many historians to be our weakest president that we have had. He called for a return to normalcy. His vice president was Calvin Coolidge, and I'll show you a likeness here, Calvin Coolidge. We'll talk more about Calvin Coolidge at a later time anyway. All right, so let's continue on for just a second here for... I want to go back to my camera here. I'm sorry. And for Warren G. Harding, Warren Gamaliel Harding. His friends were part of what was called the Ohio Gang. A lot of these guys, they weren't terribly honest, by the way, too. And you could always find these guys smoking and drinking down on K Street. That's in Washington, D.C. Whoa, wait a minute here. Smoking and drinking down on K Street? This is a time of prohibition. Well, the president was in defiance of the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Yeah. I'll share a couple of quotations here from Warren G. Harding. I'm a man of limited talents from a small town. I don't seem to grasp that I'm president of the United States. Isn't there a book out there that I can read that'll tell me how to be the president of the United States? Well, that's just the kind of guy that Harding was. All right, let's move on here, folks. And Harding's administration, and I really, personally, I think that Warren G. Harding was not involved in the several scandals that came out during his administration. I think that he had poor oversight, and he just wasn't forceful enough with his cabinet members and with his people around him. And one of the worst scandals that erupted out of the Harding administration was that of the Teapot Dome scandal. It involved a transferring of rich naval oil supplies from government ownership and transferring it over to the Department of the Interior, and then subsequently transferred over into the hands of friends of the Secretary of the Department of the Interior, Albert Bacon Fall. A huge scandal with that, and Albert Bacon Fall actually went to prison as a result of that. Okay, in 1923, the president suddenly and mysteriously died here, folks. If we had more time, I would tell you more about that. But he died. He was on a trip out to Alaska, as a matter of fact, and became quite sick, and he was taken back to the Ambassador Hotel in San Francisco, where he died. And Calvin Coolidge now becomes President of the United States here. Calvin Coolidge, often referred to as Silent Cal, was sworn into office in Plymouth Notch, Vermont, in the kitchen of his house. His house had no electricity, so his father was a justice of the peace and swore him into office to the illumination of a kerosene lantern. Today, if you go to the Calvin Coolidge's home, it's run by the National Park Service, and not very far from there, you can find, and this is just so characteristic of Calvin Coolidge, you can find his grave site, and notice there's a simple flag, a simple stone there, and that's just the way that Silent Cal actually was. So I think I'm going to stop for the time being here. We'll go back to my photograph here, folks, and this shows you Calvin Coolidge right here. All right, so when we come back in, next time we're together here, folks, I want to go through the presidential election of 1924. We're going to presidential election 1928. Calvin Coolidge was a Republican. Warren G. Harding was a Republican. Herbert Hoover is a Republican. So we're going to see this period of Republican presidents here. But then we're going to go into the 1932 presidential election, and we're going to see some big changes to take place in our country here for a long period of time here, folks. Okay, thank you for your attendance.